All right, sounds good.
This is Ed, buddy. I hope you feel better.
$11 o'clock on your Friday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you. Guys, we were hopeful to see something good on the baseball diamond last night. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Gamecocks fall 9-3, the number one team in the country, Tennessee, and now face the uphill battle of playing from behind for the rest of the weekend.
Hold on, I got to go watch the College Football 25 debut trailer.
Oh, is it out? Okay, sorry.
You missed my tweet.
I did not see your tweet. We were get things set up for the show.
It was set to come out right at 11, like right now.
Oh, wow.
It's debuting.
Okay.
So, Tyler, have you already requested for the day off on the day it comes out?
It's a Friday. I'll have to look into that.
July 19th?
July 19th.
Yeah, you need to get on that. But
I do need to get on that.
All right, I guess we got to talk about baseball. I mean, you know, a lot of games play out maybe not the way they could on paper. Other times in sports, games play out maybe the way a fan base just sort of is hoping it doesn't, or the way that you look on paper and you know, to me, this one very much played out exactly the way you were worried about if you were South Carolina. Chris, we got you on there, man? I think we're having a couple technical difficulties here. But, you know, for South Carolina, they come out, I thought, you know, they started the game fairly well. You get the Petrie home run early on, and you sort of are in a position where you had something good happen early on, which has not been the case in a lot of games for South Carolina as of late. And, you know, I thought that could maybe be a big moment for South Carolina. I thought that could be a situation where South Carolina could maybe build a little bit of just early momentum and confidence in this game. But Tennessee, with this lineup and the way the ball was traveling last night, just kind of did what they do, and that's put relentless pressure on you. You know, even when South Carolina kind of chipped away, it looked like they might be able to potentially make this a game. Tennessee hits that big 3-run homer. To me, at that point, the game is just by most purposes, the game at that point is over. And so, you know, I think for South Carolina, this is obviously nowhere near the way you were hoping this series would start. And to me, and I'm not saying this picking on Ty Good, because Ty Good has been, I mean, really one of your better pitchers for much of this year. But with your starting pitching, when you're in situations where you give up 5-6 runs within the first 3 or 4 innings of the game. When you put yourself in a spot where you're not just down 1, down 2, down a couple, we have consistently seen South Carolina giving up big numbers early in games. And I don't care how talented your offense is. I don't care how much talent or how much ability you have on offense. When that happens, you're just not going to win games.
Yeah, and Chris, when we look at last night, it made sense putting Ty Good in that starting role as he'd done a good job, in that second slot behind Roman Kimball in most of the, game ones over the past couple of weekends. But it just really looked like he was not comfortable. He had trouble finding the strike zone. Roughly half of his pitches ended up being balls. I don't know if it was the moment of playing a number one team in their home, venue or what it was, but Good did not look as sharp as we've seen him at times this year.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you look at, I think it was his last outing, remember him, giving up a homer at least in that game. But you look kind of aside from that, and he really commanded his pitches well. He had a bunch of strikeouts. You look at this game, like you said, Tyler, 44, this is according to Jack Veltry's numbers here from GamecockCentral.com, 44 of 89 pitches were thrown for balls, right? And then when he did get some over the plate, Tennessee, hammered them, and Gamecocks ended up giving up 4 homers. And I think that was a concern, right? Because when we had on Mike Wilson yesterday, he pointed out, this is a park where there's a lot of long balls. And so when you looked at the statistics coming into this series and into game 1, all right, you played some really, really good offensive teams lately if you're South Carolina. Played Kentucky, played Georgia. Those are teams that hit really well, that hit a lot of homers. I mean, Georgia hit a whole bunch of homers in Founders Park. But Tennessee is actually the team that offensively, they came into this series leading the SEC, a loaded league, in a whole bunch of offensive categories, and one of them was home runs. I mean, I think the only major category they don't lead the SEC in is stolen bases. And so that was the concern, right? For a South Carolina pitching staff that had kind of scuffled recently, they've had a hard time, being consistent. You go to Good to start the game, and you want to have like a shutdown inning. You want that Petrie homer to kind of resonate and not just be, you want it to be a 1-0 game or be able to build that. You're exactly right, Wes, when you pointed out how this team's just gotten in a hole so fast, and that's exactly what you got. Tennessee's able to tie it up. Christian Moore immediately, and then they go on and hit some more homers. Ty Good struggles with his control. So it's just kind of been a little bit of everything. The struggles that we've seen when this team has struggled throughout the year, I think we saw all those in game 1, right? We saw the pitching inconsistency. We saw, Tennessee only had, one more hit than South Carolina, but they hit 4 home runs in the game, and they did a little bit better with runners in scoring position, whereas South Carolina was not able to capitalize on those opportunities.
Yeah, and I think, South Carolina, like you said, they had 8 hits, Tennessee 9. It's just hard to manufacture anything offensively when you're down 6-1. Like, I think, let's say, if you play this game out and South Carolina isn't giving up the big innings, and, I thought, even though they were already down, the 3-run bomb in the 7th, I believe right after you had an overturned call that put runners back on base basically for you if you're Tennessee and put you in that situation. You score 3. At that point, you were down 6-2, and if you're South Carolina, you're 1 big inning away, or even just 1 decent inning away from feeling like, all right, we're at least in striking distance. And when you go down 9-2, then you're like, all right, they're like 3 big innings away. And that's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
It's not. And when you look at, and Petrie, had at second batter of the game, had that home run. Messina had his home run in the 6th inning. And I brought the stat up plenty times more this morning. Between those 2 home runs, 5 innings apart, you had 1 hit. you just weren't able to string together enough offense to get anything going there until later on in the game. They got a couple hits in the 7th inning, got a couple hits in the 8th, and Reeves ends up driving in that last run in the top of the 8th. You just didn't have enough consistent offense early on in the game to keep pace with the Tennessee, and that's what we saw last weekend against Georgia. Going back to that first game where they combined for 24 runs, there was at least a little bit of going back and forth. Like, okay, well, Georgia scored 3 here, you scored 2 there. Like, you were kind of keeping step with them to a degree. That didn't happen last night. You didn't feel like Carolina had a chance.
Yeah, but once you start stringing together hits and it's already 9-2, I mean, that's just a completely different game than if you've given up 5 runs at that point. I think you have to have the opponent in a position where they feel pressure. Like, there's a difference between runners in scoring position and I'm on defense, and this is a 1-run game versus I've got 7 runs to play with.
Yeah.
I'm not sweating, Sure. You're comfortable, you're calm, you're confident. So it's just different when you're constantly down. You press a little bit more offensively. You press, we have to score a run in this situation. And then you don't, and it just deflates your entire dugout. So, I don't know what the answers are. This will sound like an excuse. This is not. This is more explanation than anything. Kingston mentioned, is there something to Ty Good? Maybe just getting his heart rate up a little bit more as a starter, like trying to go out there and being amped up a little bit. I was listening to Stuart Lake and Derek. I always try to cut in and see what they're saying at times when I'm watching a game on TV. And they said basically Ty Good did not look comfortable on the mound. And I mean that like
physically,
like literally.
Yes.
Even when he was apparently when he was warming up, he slipped as he was throwing. He was constantly kind of messing with his landing spot on the mound. That is part of going on the road. That's part of actually, to me, one of the reasons why, one of those kind of little hidden reasons why it's harder to win on the road than it is at home. You could probably throw off your home mound with your eyes shut if you're a pitcher. When you get on the road, there's these little intricacies. You'd like to think every mound is going to be the same, but it's really not. And until you work that out, you may have some issues. And against Tennessee, they are going to make you pay for your issues. Chris, we talked about Christian Moore with Mike Wilson.
Yep.
Dude, I mean, this guy, I mean, he's not Charlie Condon, but he's right up there as one of the best in the league.
Well, and I was just going to bring that up, actually. Our counterparts at VolQuest, who cover Tennessee sports on the On3 network, they do a great job covering the program. And obviously coming at it from a Tennessee perspective, they actually had a piece up this morning like, hey, everybody rightfully so talks about Charlie Condon and Jack Caglione, but Christian Moore is right up there in that conversation. And he should be. I mean, he's a tremendous player. The top, Mike Wilson told us yesterday, the top of this Tennessee lineup from 1 to 5 is the most dangerous part of the lineup. That's where they gotten a lot of their production. And, of course, Moore is in there. And he's a huge reason for that, and that part of the lineup did certainly punish South Carolina yesterday with Moore hitting a couple home runs. So it just got away from them early, and that's been – now you drop 4 straight. We've kind of seen in some ways, not that all the games were the same, but we have seen some similar themes, right? And it's really what you mentioned, Wes. South Carolina digging a hole early, not getting good starts from their pitchers. And so as you go through, game 2, game 3 of this series, that's something you're going to have to do. Can you actually put Tennessee in a hole in the early innings where they're the ones having to fight back and not you? Because South Carolina has not been comfortable as of late. They've had some come from behind wins and they've battled back, sure. But when you're playing the likes of Georgia and Tennessee and these high-powered offenses, it's one thing to get down by 1 or 2 runs, but when you're getting down, like you said, by 5, 6 runs, it's really, really hard to dig out of that.
A lot more to unpack from this game from last night and looking ahead not only to the rest of this weekend, but to the postseason as well and seeing where South Carolina is going to shake out with that. We'll dive into that more coming up. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Friday here on The Game.
All right, guys, we tell you about it every single episode. Our friends at Firehouse Subs, presenting sponsor here at the show. It is almost lunchtime, which means it is time for you to order your Friday lunch from Firehouse Subs. Easiest way to do that is by heading on over to firehousesubs.com or hopping on the Firehouse Subs app and hitting Rapid Rescue to go. Avoid the wait. Order online. Order now with the Rapid Rescue. They're going to have your sandwich waiting for you in a bag with the chips on the shelf right when you walk in. If you want to try something new, how about this new barbecue Cuban? I'm looking at it right now on the website. It's Southern Roots with a Cuban twist. Or go with my favorite, brisket, add bacon. It is absolutely undefeated. The bacon sets it off. Give it a try. Whatever your favorites are, I promise you they have something for you, something you'll love at Firehouse Subs. Again, go check out firehousesubs.com or download that app, save your favorites, and to get points every single time.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Friday morning, reacting to what we saw last night out there in Knoxville. Gamecocks falling to the number one Volunteers 9-3. Second game coming up this afternoon at 6:30. And then the series wraps up tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock, all right here on the game. With good going last night, as expected, starting game number 1. TBA for today and tomorrow. I would expect Eli Jones to maybe be the game 2 pitcher as he has been, and then Gainey still is an option out of the bullpen if you need him tonight, and if not, then you start him in game number 3 like you did last weekend. Because we talked about it yesterday. If you're in a situation last night where, say, you were up maybe a run or 2 going into the 8th inning, you would probably have burned Gainey then to try and preserve things and get the win. And again, you have that option again tonight if you want to do that. And again, if you don't have to use him, then you save him for game 3. Regardless, he's going to be very important wherever he ends up coming in for this pitching staff this weekend.
Yeah, that's probably how I would play it, honestly. I don't have any information on what their thought process is on that, but I think that's what you have to do if you have a chance. I mean, you're sitting there going, can we just put ourselves in a spot to win one game? And I know that's a little bit of almost a loser's mentality. You don't want to think like that in terms of winning a series. You want to go win the thing, but
right.
If you have a chance to steal a game from them in Knoxville, you have to take it. And to me, it comes right back down to, can you get the start you need from guys? And if you can get a more traditional Eli Jones start that we've gotten used to seeing for much of the year as opposed to what we've seen the last 2 weeks, then, I think you could piggyback him, Gainey, and Veach to sort of that's your 9 innings in some
way, right.
split right there. And so I think that's 3 of your better guys. And if that opportunity is there, you go try to win this game and figure out tomorrow. And because you got to stop the bleeding. You can't have this committee looking back at the way you finished this season and it potentially being 6 regular season SEC losses in a row.
And Chris, that's a good point that Wes brings up, because we talk about these metrics, and there's a lot that goes into your ultimate seed in the NCAA tournament, but those last 10 games or somewhere around that is going to be a big factor when you're talking about the human element of what have you done for me lately. And as of right now, South Carolina is not going to have a good track record for those final couple of games.
Well, yeah, and the final 6, you can kind of envision the scenario you would like to get to, which is win at least one of these. And I agree with you, Wes. I had the same thought this morning before we came on here. You need to win one. And, of course, if you can go win 2, great. But, when you're thinking of it from a management standpoint with your pitching staff that, again, has had some struggles lately, and you're playing a really good team, the number 1 team in the country, consensus, on the road, who's pitching really well, who's obviously hitting really well, you have to think from a management standpoint, hey, we got to find a way to get one, because otherwise you're staring down the barrel of 6 straight SEC losses to 2 really good teams, sure, but a home, series sweep against Georgia and then a series sweep on the road, and that's what you'd be carrying into postseason play, and that's obviously not something that you want to happen. Now have teams had, if you're looking at the overall body of work, to bring up the example again, Ole Miss, got into postseason play a couple years ago, losing SEC record, ended up winning the national title, right? You never know when you got a team that shows capabilities. It's about getting hot at the right time. But South Carolina has kind of done the opposite lately. They're kind of going cold at the wrong time. And so the question is that the competition level, does that have something to do with it? Sure. I mean, Georgia is a really, really good team. Tennessee's obviously heated up to where they're number 1 in the country. But you're going to face really, really good teams in the postseason as well. And so you can't just say, they'll figure it out because they've had some bad patches and they've rebounded. This is the time where you've really got to figure it out, and you've got to go get one this weekend so that you don't leave anything to chance.
I have some folks that want to weigh in on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Let's go out to Teresa real quick. She has a question in regards to pitching. Teresa, appreciate your call. What's on your mind this morning?
Hi, I listen to y'all all the time. I enjoy it.
Thank you.
I'm a Gamecock fan, and I've watched baseball for a long time, and I understand why they put certain players to bat, up at the top, the lineup, because they want a good hitter and to get on base and stuff. Seems like every time Petrie or Petrie, I don't know how you say his name, hits a home run, there's nobody hardly on base. I know they've changed the lineup before and stuff. Why not put him further down and try to see if the other ones can get on base? Seems like when we hit a home run, there's nobody on base. When a team like, I understand Tennessee's number one in the country, when they hit, it's two players on base or three. I mean, I know they have probably better hitters. I don't know. Or maybe I know they got better pitching. But I know they've tried that before, and I understand why, the reason they put them at the top. But is that a stupid thing to ask? Or, try something, change the lineup different? And I know he's done it before, but not in that way.
Appreciate your call there, Teresa. It's a very valid question to ask, and this is something that baseball as a whole has kind of adapted to over the years of not maybe always putting your best hitter in that fourth slot, which is where Messina is now, and obviously very capable hitter, hit a home run last night himself. And unfortunately, I mean, Petrie did have the home run in the first inning, and Brindling wasn't on base at that point in time, but we do see a lot of scenarios where he is hitting solo home runs, and that is a valid question to ask.
Yeah, not a dumb question at all. You used to always see your best traditional baseball best hitter is either fourth or third. That's where you plug them in the lineup, and that was deemed to be the best combination of you're going to have guys on base, but also you're early enough in the lineup that you're going to get a lot of ABs. And you look at baseball; it's played over 162 games in MLB, 50 plus games in college baseball. And these days, the analytics tell you a lot of teams to put their best hitter second. And what that supposedly does is supposed to be the best balance between possibly getting guys on base, but giving your best hitters more ABs, because over a long – it may be the difference in one AB in a game, but over the course of a long season, that's going to mean, let's say Petrie's hitting second versus fourth for an entirety of a season, that's going to be more at-bats for him. But sometimes it just plays out like that. Sometimes your guys just aren't getting on base enough. Now, Brindling has got on base. Like you can't really fault him. Like he's been a on-base machine leading off. Is there an argument to be made for, maybe Petrie should be third? You could make that argument. At the same time, we've heard Kingston talk about this, Tyler. They've also leaned heavily into going left, right in terms of how they construct their lineup, lefty-righty, basically.
And looking at things from a recency perspective here, I mean, last night, Lee Corey and Cassis combined to go 0 for 8, so those guys weren't getting on base at the bottom of your lineup. And same thing last weekend, you didn't have as much production at the bottom of the lineup as far as getting guys on base go. So when Petrie comes up, he's not having the complement of guys on base to drive in as much. But again, it is a very good question. And Chris, like Wes mentioned there, we've just seen kind of baseball shift this way based on the analytics, which have changed so many things about the game to where that best hitter sometimes does go a little bit higher in the lineup because, the numbers suggest that's your best option.
Well, sometimes you're making tweaks to the lineup or to the pitching staff because things aren't working or you're searching for an answer. Sometimes you may pick up something, hey, when we've done this analytically, it's worked, right? And so when you think about South Carolina's pitching staff, a lot of it is just, at this point, there's been so many changes. Hey, we're trying to piece this together. We're trying to figure this thing out because there's been some struggles. Offensively, there's been obviously some tweaks to the lineup throughout the course of the season. There's been some tweaks to where guys are hitting in the lineup. There's been some tweaks to leadoff. And, frankly, sometimes those moves are made and you go, that is working out very well until it doesn't, right? So some of that is just, I think, baseball. I think maybe the bigger point here is that South Carolina has at times seemed to struggle more with runners in scoring position. I mean, this played out last night, right? So Tennessee had one more hit, 9-8, I think is what you said, Wes. They hit 4 homers. South Carolina hit 2. Well, the Gamecocks got theirs off solo shots. Tennessee got 7 runs off those homers. And then South Carolina was, 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position. And so that's what happened individually in the game. But you can pick out some other instances this season where there have been some struggles with runners in scoring position for sure.
We have more of your thoughts from the Love Chevrolet phone lines. We continue our conversation about baseball. Again, Gamecocks falling 9-3 to Tennessee last night in Game 1. Game 2 coming up later on today at 6:30. Pregame coverage starting at 6:15 right here on the Game. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark continue to react to last night's loss in game number 1 out there in Knoxville to the number 1 Tennessee Volunteers. Want to head back out to Love Chevrolet phone lines. Dan's been hanging on. He's been patient. Dan wants to weigh in on what he's seen in the South Carolina baseball program. Dan, appreciate your call. What's on your mind this morning? Sure.
I think we should be looking at national seeds, not hosting regionals. And my expectations for Carolina baseball are that at least 40 to 50% of the time we should be a national seed. I think our current standing, that's a great expectation for Coastal Carolina, not for South Carolina. I just think it's time. I think there's enough data now that we see what the Kingston era has been, and it's time to move on. I have nothing against Kingston by measure. He's a fantastic man. I hope nothing but great things for him. But what I'm seeing on the field and year to year, year to year, what the data is, this isn't the standard of Carolina baseball.
Appreciate the call there, Dan, and thank you so much for hanging on as long as you did. And Chris, I'll start off with you. I get that sentiment from a lot of people. I got some calls early on this morning. I was reading some text off the Firehouse Subs text line. A lot of people share similar thoughts to Dan, that like, when you think about what South Carolina baseball has been historically, all those trips to Omaha, the national championships, all that kind of stuff, to be where the program is right now, where just hoping that you can make something happen in a regional is not the standard that people expect. And again, Coach Kingston, great guy, has had levels of success here, but not to the standard of what people expect. And things are obviously trending in the wrong direction as they head into another postseason. And I'm not pounding the table saying you need to fire Coach Kingston or anything like that, but things don't look good as of right now.
Yeah, well, here's how I kind of view it right now. And I understand folks' frustration because you got to remember how the Ray Tanner era ended, right? 2 national titles, runner-up in a third. I mean, the body of work at the end of his tenure and really throughout his tenure was incredible, right? And you haven't been able to recapture that or get back to Omaha since you've been close and painfully close, actually, under the 2 coaches that, came after Ray Tanner. And so people want to get back there, and they want to get back there more than, every 10 years or something like that. And I agree that the standard, that was set should be higher than that. But here's what I think. I mean, you do have to let this season play out because I think this season is a pretty integral one. Like everybody thought that going in. Could it get tricky as to what you do in the future? Yeah, but it just kind of depends, right? If South Carolina, for instance, makes a regional and they don't get out of the regional, we'll have to cover the story and everything, but that would not bode as well. If South Carolina, gets to a super and misses Omaha by 1 run, Will that complicate it? Maybe. Could they make it in Omaha? I don't think anybody's sitting here making projections saying, yeah, this looks like an Omaha team, right? But you do have to let the season play out. You got to let this weekend play out. You got to let the postseason play out and see what happens. I do tend to think that type of thing will take care of itself, but I understand why it's a talking point among the fan base now, and it's been a talking point before this season as well.
Yeah, appreciate the phone call, Dan. I mean, that was not a fire everybody. That was not a I'm ticked off and I want to fire everybody at the first sign of anything negative call. That was a level-headed, you could tell Dan, goes to the games and still pulls for the team, but wants greatness for his program as he should. And I'm not. It's going to sound like I'm both siding the argument. That's not what I'm trying to do. I think when you start getting macro, there are two sides to everything.
Sure.
I think we have to. And when I made the comment, can South Carolina, however I said it, can South Carolina find a way to steal one out of Knoxville? Even as that was coming out of my mouth, I was like,
feels wrong.
That's not what you're used to from South Carolina baseball. And
sure.
I still agree with that comment, but from a fan macro standpoint, you don't want for me to be making that comment right now.
Right. And a texter a little bit earlier, kind of made a similar point. And when you look at these past two teams South Carolina's played, and Tennessee's put together several good seasons going to Omaha. Past couple of years, obviously number one as of right now, and project to go there once again. But like last weekend against Georgia in their first year under Coach Wes Johnson, that's a program that had underperformed over the course of the past decade, a program that you felt like you were ahead of going into this season, and they seemingly have passed you by. Tennessee the same way over the years. And a lot of programs in the SEC that have seemingly taken that spot that South Carolina once held as one of the most feared teams in the conference, that now when you look at South Carolina in your schedule, you're not as afraid of them as you were 7-8 years ago or however long it's been. And that is something that, again, the fan base has a high standard that the team right now is not living up to.
Yeah, and I think your standard as a fan should always be slightly above what is really actually realistic, I think. Now, your expectations shouldn't be, we have to go to Omaha every year. That's not happening.
Which nobody goes to Omaha every year.
Your expectation also, to Dan's point, shouldn't be, just hope we can backdoor into the playoffs, like into the tournament. That's not fair for South Carolina either. Now, what I was getting to in terms of both siding this, I think we all have to accept that the SEC, to an extent, has caught up. And, I mean, it is a meat grinder. Like, you're facing a great team every single week. That, as good as the SEC used to be, that was not the case when South Carolina was in their prime. So I think we have to adjust the expectations a little bit for that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you as a fan have to accept where things are right now. Both things can be true. It can be a more difficult conference. You can accept that maybe we're not going to contend as much as you used to or you think you should.
Right.
But does that still mean you can have the expectation to contend more and to be better than you are right now? Of course, that is completely fair.
Yeah, and Chris, it just seems like we're at an interesting crossroads with where this program's at right now.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation is going to be rebooted. Heck, I mean, maybe tonight, but we're going to be talking a lot more about this depending on how the season plays out, right? So, I understand, and I thought it was a great phone call by Dan, and I agree with you, Wes, a well thought out phone call, and that's the type of phone call you can appreciate, where there's perspective and there's, thought put into it. And there's going to be differing opinions among the fan base with anything, but I think the consensus is people want to see more success. And so, again, we'll be having more of this conversation depending on how the season plays out, whenever it does end, I'm sure.
And I will say this, I know ifs, buts, all that, injuries are part of it. I do think the staff built an Omaha team last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think the injuries ultimately piled up. Remember when that team was going at full force? I mean, that was an elite team we saw for South Carolina last year. And so sometimes you need a little luck along the way as well. And that did not happen for South Carolina last year.
Plenty more conversation about the baseball program as the day goes along, and certainly next week as we get set for Hoover. But we'll end things on a little bit of a lighter note today. Dabo's talking once again. We'll hear what he had to say coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you for a few more minutes here. Again, plenty more baseball conversation as the day goes along, but want to get back to old Dabo in the upstate. We talked yesterday at length about his comments about Yeah, well, everybody's a transfer coming from high school technically, and he went on Sirius XM yesterday, and of course, everybody's talking about what he had said the day before. Doubled down in a way, and now just says that portal guys aren't good enough to play at Clemson, apparently. There's
three
Dabo
types
yesterday.
of players in the portal. I mean, it's really pretty simple. Most of the guys in the portal aren't good enough to play for us.
Yeah.
That's just
100%.
The reality of it. I mean, we have guys that are backups at Clemson that go in the portal because they just want to have an opportunity. And most of them are graduates, by the way, but we have guys that are backups, or they want a chance to go play, and I got no problem with that. And so rarely do we have a starter leave Clemson. So you've got the majority of the guys. They're guys that are in the portal because they want to have a chance to go start somewhere. Mm-hmm. They're not playing where they are. They're not good enough to come in and play for us. And so we'd rather take a good high school player, as long as we can get them, which we do, and you develop them. That's the first type. The second type of guy that goes in the portal is he's only going in the portal as a formality because the deal's already been done. Mm-hmm. He knows where he's going before he ever goes in the portal. So we're not getting that guy. Mm-hmm. And then the third type of guy is going in the portal just to see what he can get. And we're never going to win that war. So, we've been really fortunate because, first of all, we're established, been there 16 years. Mm-hmm. And we don't have a lot of attrition. I mean, we had 127 guys go through spring ball, and 125 are still on the roster, after spring, post-portal closing. So that's a miracle in today's world.
Now, I will say this. I don't think Dabo's necessarily wrong about all that. The player types of 2 and 3 that he talked about there, that does happen. But to say that there's guys in the portal, that most guys in the portal aren't good enough to play for your team, I think that's a little ridiculous.
Well, and, are most of the guys in the portal not good enough to play for Clemson? Ding, true.
Sure.
Most of the guys in the portal, probably at this point, the numbers are so big, aren't good enough to start at most Power 5 teams. So if you want to get super technical, is he right? Yes. Is his point? He's trying to make a point, though, that, we're not recruiting the portal. The real answer or question to him, the follow-up is, are you saying there aren't any guys in the portal good enough to play at Clemson? That's the real follow-up here.
Right.
And, Chris, the answer is, of course there are guys in the portal good enough to play for Clemson. They have struggled at certain positions that have kept them from being the playoff team we saw them consistently be for a few years, and now being a good team. You tell me there was it some wide receiver that they could have gone out the last couple of years and upgraded their receiving core?
You're trying to tell me that A.D. Mitchell or Keon Coleman wasn't good enough to play at Clemson last year?
Exactly, yeah. And there are others. I mean, if Caleb Downs, Clemson's recruited very well at DB, but if Caleb Downs, who is leaving his school primarily probably because of a coaching change, if he called up Clemson, they're going to say, you know what, we're good, Caleb. Nah, Isaiah Bond. Nah, you can go play at Texas. You can go play at Ohio State, but not here. It's kind of one of those things where, yes, those 3 types of players in the portal, those are real. I actually agree with those. But you can't do the thing where, because they did offer some players out of the portal and they didn't get them, right? Not many, but some, particularly along the offensive line. Don't do the thing where you're slandering the entire portal and the entire process just because, yes, there are some guys that fit into those buckets. Guys, I've seen several versions of this joke going around social media since Dabo made those comments. I mean, they have some guys playing for Clemson that aren't good enough to play at Clemson. Really, that's kind of been a running joke with Dabo during his time there. So, yeah, there are certainly plenty of players, and actually players that Clemson could get if they were more aggressive in the portal. It would be a very attractive destination for a lot of portal players, I think.
No, absolutely. And not only more aggressive in the portal, more aggressive with their NIL as well, which, again, you have a very passionate fan base up there that I feel like if you told them, hey, we got to hit this number, would be more than willing to try and do that. But that is not the path they want to go. And with Dabo, it's almost like when a little kid tells a lie and then has to keep telling lies to supplement the first lie so the story makes sense. He says these things, then has to go out and further say more things, try and justify what the first thing that he said was, and it just snowballs and goes more and more and more.
You know, when you explain your comments to this extent, it's like he doth protest too much. It's like sometimes you just got to stop talking, I think.
Probably so. But hey, when they stick a microphone in his face, he's got a lot to say, and that doesn't show any signs of slowing anytime soon, unfortunately.
No, you're right.
That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Back in on Monday, hopefully talking about more positive things with baseball. Myself, Terry Ford, coming up next with a halftime show on your Friday here on The Game.
All right, guys.